Off we go. And off we go for this 8th of May,
Where it's
2020.
snowing.
It is snowing. Not in my photograph, which I took yesterday. This is the southern
No, but you live
exposure
in the land of Oz.
of the garden. Here you can see the little terracotta bunnies behind me, and
Yes, you've got
the antique stool.
I bet you bought those.
No. And the rocks that have been rearranged 87 times in this garden in the last.
By you?
Yes, by me. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a garbage pail.
Can you put that one over there somewhere? No, that is a garbage pail with a towel in it for the little baby squirrels that we were looking out for.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cute is the only word that comes to mind.
My mind.
Other than that, I'm speechless.
I've lost my cotton-picking mind. But speaking
I don't think you're alone.
No, I'm not. But speaking of people who have a mind, we are privileged to be speaking with Mitch Joel this morning, a gentleman whom I've never met, but whom...
Good morning, Mitch.
Oh, hey there.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
We're good. Thank you very much. Mitch Joel, author, digital marketing expert, lecturer, teacher, and man of leisure in Westmount somewhere this morning.
Leisure?
Is that pretty?
Yeah, I don't know if any of that was right, but whatever you guys, your show. I don't. Okay.
Betsy says hi.
Good. How is she doing?
Very well these days. Very well.
Good.
She just started her Zoom class at McGill, and it all went off without a hitch. And she's happy for that. 27 students on Zoom.
Oh, that's great.
Where to begin? Let's begin with today and work backward. What, as a digital marketing guy, what are you telling clients? What are you telling people who pay attention to you these days?
Well, I'm no longer a digital marketing guy with any clients, so nothing. I'm not telling anybody anything.
Well, those who would appear at your lectures or who would listen to your podcast, for example.
Yeah, well, I've been out of the agency business now for close to 2 years, so that's been great, and it's been a fun experience of mostly speaking, advising, and investing. Not much to say these days because, as you can imagine, the speaking business is all but gone. I have friends who have interesting jobs who will eventually go back to their office. I, for one, can't imagine going back to a place where you fly somewhere and have 3,000 people sitting shoulder to shoulder. But, I'm hoping that world changes very drastically and quickly because I'd like to go back to doing that because I really love it. And the podcast has been great. It's been going for close to 15 years now. I do it every Sunday. It's been great because there's people who have been typically busy to get access to have been more than willing to come on the show now because they probably have a bit more time in terms of their day. So that's been fun, just getting a sort of some guests that I just couldn't get before that are eager to make it happen now. And the world's on fire. Otherwise, things are lovely.
I was watching a video last night, a presentation you gave for Canadian Music Week.
Oh, that was a while ago, yeah.
Quite a while, I guess it was. And I thought, well, I'm going to skim through this. And I watched the entire thing, and I was as fascinated by the presence of mind and the alacrity and the passion you had for the content as much as I was for the content that you were presenting. You breathe this stuff. It's quite something to watch you in action.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I do love what I do. I'm very lucky to love what I do. And even in these trying times when people say, so how will you pivot if you're not going to be able to get up on stage? The answer is I'm not quite sure that I am going to pivot. I might just sit it out, which is sort of what I'm doing now. And the reason I say that is because one of the things I really love to do is to fire open PowerPoint and build a deck. Like I really enjoy that because I spend most of my days, probably like both of you do, being an infovore. I'm just sort of chasing down stories and ideas and saving them. And my favorite thing to do when I save them is to tag it as slide, because I just know that that's going to be a great story or something I can turn into something for the live arena. But you're right in that I'm lucky that I have the ability to write and the ability to broadcast. So, ideas get to sort of squeak their way into different platforms or mediums as I choose.
But in that video, the viewer can't see the deck, so it's just you telling a story.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Yeah, the
that's
slides make it so much better.
yeah, but it's a testament to how well you express yourself. Dave, I'm sorry, I could go on for a long time here if you want to jump
Yeah,
in
well, you
and
told me
ask a
before you
question.
were going to skim over for an hour and 10 minutes and ended up watching it. I think, Mitch, it'd be nice to convey to people the message you are trying to convey these
Yeah.
days in
I got
social
because I got
media.
three little pigs. I've got the three presets
Yeah.
too that you talked about. So
Yeah, well, it's two things. You know, one is at a fundamental level, I help leaders and managers and directors decode the future. I help them think about new ways to communicate, new ways to build out business models, new ways to think about consumer behaviors. And then on the other side, really the sort of, the sort of triangle of my content is primarily driven by the interaction between brands, consumers, and technology. So that's sort of the playground that I've always been in. Some of the outputs have been, publishing traditional magazines. Some of them have been in helping launch, one of the first search engines on the internet before Google existed. Some of them was in trying to figure out if mobile content was something 20 years ago before it actually became something. A lot of it was spent in the agency days that I have. I put a lot of energy into not just having ideas for clients, which I don't really have anymore because I'm not in the agency business. I sold that, but more in terms of creating ideas that can just be communicated in one way or another. But that's kind of my métier, is that sort of world of brands, consumers, and technology.
You seem to have been
image-based,
born.
mobile, and social, right? I'm sorry, David, go ahead.
Well, I was just mentioning that Mitch, you seem to have been born with a computer in your hands, and I don't think that is specific to your age. You're less than 50, but you seem to be even amongst that group to have been born with a computer.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very lucky in the sense of I came from a family that was four boys, and our parents were very hardworking, middle class people who I think were very strategic in the choices they made about what they purchased for the home. So instead of it maybe being, four gifts during the holiday season, they would buy the first Atari computer that came out. So I was definitely toying around with that stuff in the early days. I remember printing up a book report in elementary school on a dot matrix printer, and the teacher giving me a zero and sending it home because it wasn't handwritten. And how could they prove it was me who wrote it?
I used to
so
get the opposite.
so yeah, very, very early days of that. But the truth is that the technology has really surpassed me, and my interest isn't in the technology in terms of how it's built and what it and how to build it, but rather what it can do. And so that tends to be my approach. So even when it comes to people asking me somewhat technical questions about things that they want to do on Facebook or Instagram, I suddenly feel like a grandparent where I have no clue what they're talking about.
That
But
makes
I
me feel
understand.
better, Mitch.
Yeah,
That makes
but
me
I
feel a lot
understand.
better.
I do understand that if you have something to say or you want to create something, what these platforms can do. And I think that that's more important than how to do them. I think there are some people who are on the how to. I come more at it from the why to or why not to.
Uh, Image-based, mobile, and social. Is that still the refrain? Is it still the big impact on the mobile device here?
I mean, I think it depends. I definitely think that if you're a brand and looking at a way to balance out sort of your generic advertising or what you're doing in your advertising models, that the attraction for that sort of quick fix is still played out in a world that is image based, so like text or video, sorry, pictures or videos, that it is social, that it inherently is something that people want to talk about and share, and that most of the people are consuming it on their mobile. I think that that's still a fair statement. I say that in full disclosure, being someone who only creates long form text or long form audio. Uh, but the reason for that is because there is a massive audience for that as well, obviously. The difference is that if you're a business, small, medium, large, B2B, B2C, and trying to make more of an impact, it's probably a shorter and easier route just because that's where people are. But that doesn't mean it's for everybody. It doesn't mean it's the only thing. It means at a macro level, if you're trying to compete with more traditional advertising and communications budgets, there is another way to do it. I also believe, though, that you have to be able to acknowledge as both a business or an individual, what are your strengths? So it's easy for me to say that and be like, oh, we should be on TikTok then. But my message would be, if that's not your strength, which clearly it isn't my strength, you have to work to your strengths. So my
What's
strengths happen to
TikTok,
be writing and speaking.
There
Mitch?
you go. That's
Yeah,
something
what
that's
is
quite new.
TikTok?
TikTok is something,
Yeah.
a relatively
What
new
is TikTok?
phenomenon. That's right. There's a
Yeah.
question for you.
Well, TikTok is just basically a place where kids, adults, and people are going to connect. It is very video based. It's very music based. It's very dance movement based. It's very joke based. And it's sort of the best way I've heard it described is Brene Brown was being interviewed on Tim Ferriss's podcast, and Tim Ferriss explained it as TikTok is like the heroin dealer in the alley who's going, "Psst, come here," and once you go and down that rabbit hole, you're a junkie forever because it's just nonsense and short videos and funny quips and music, and it is a sort of rapidization of everything together from Instagram and YouTube to social networking.
Has it
Okay. Well,
eclipsed?
that's where I get the image.
You were talking about Instagram as a marketing platform in the video I was watching. Again, it's probably a couple of years old now. Has TikTok eclipsed Instagram now in its
No, I don't. I'm not a big. I don't believe we really live too much in a world of that, of what I would call winners and losers. I don't think it's an either or. I think everything is with, not instead of. So, is it as big as Instagram? No. Is it still very, very big, and it leaves an opportunity for somebody who is new and trying to make a mark to have a quicker way to access? Yeah, I think it is. So I wouldn't choose one or the other. I think it depends on the type of content you're creating, type of audience you're trying to engage with. I don't. I'm very agnostic when it comes to that stuff. I don't think one's better than the other. I think they're all just different. It's like saying what channel is better. Depends the type of content you're looking for.
Heard you
Your
discussing with
view on
someone.
basic neurological of it, if I just may, Yvonne,
Go,
Mitch,
please.
your view on that basic neurological level, why are images so compelling? And you try to get business leaders through images.
Yeah, I mean, look, we've been like this just as humans forever, so I don't think it's really necessarily anything new. We were carving sketches on cave walls by candlelight or darkness, so I don't look at it that way. I don't think that's the best way to look at it in terms of why. I think we've just always been very visual humans.
David and I have been discussing this on and off in recent weeks about companies protecting their brands in the midst of this pandemic. And you talk about, you're still talking about your three little pigs these days?
Yeah, I mean, there's not a correlation between brands and being protected and the three little pigs. The three little pigs are just this sort of analogy I use to how to think at a macro level about what your business is doing in terms of innovation, disruption, and ultimately, getting your customers to buy. But there's not a correlation between the three little pigs and brands being smart or strategic in these very different times.
Are people, the impression I have in some instances is that people are backing off. They're not perhaps putting as much effort into being, as you say, innovative, transformative, and transactionary these days? Or is that
I
just,
don't think so. I think if anything, they have to do that. I mean, that's going to be the biggest challenge coming out of this and enduring this is how do you satisfy customers? It's a very challenging time. It's a very different time. If history repeats itself, which it does always in the ad business at least, there's a retraction, and it's a normal retraction because marketing budgets get pushed aside for things like how do we get people to buy more from us immediately. The difference now being because of places like Google and Facebook, you can do more direct response and lead gen based advertising to get people's attention. So, I would argue that there's never been a more important time to think about what that's going to look like. The challenge is not being tone deaf and sort of really being present and having it make sense in terms of a customer buying from you. And I think the secondary thought that we have to really think about is not necessarily what businesses want. The government can call today to open up businesses. And the truth is, great, but are people going to buy? So if we think back to the sort of wild interview that took place between Anderson Cooper and the mayor of Las Vegas, her sort of demanding that we need to open this up, my answer was, okay, open it up, go ahead. No one's flying there, no
No
one's
one's going
going,
to
no
show
tours.
up. Yeah.
So what does that look like? And we're seeing, we have to, the thing about COVID-19 is I believe the challenge we're all faced with from a business perspective is holding two concepts in our minds at the same time. And it's a very hard thing to do, and I'm definitely challenged by it. And the two concepts are that we could come out of this, and we're seeing instances like this in places like South Korea, where people are buying like crazy. They've been cooped up too long, and they're just going out, and it's like hate shopping. Like they are literally just spending and spending. The other side might be that people have been spending several months now locked up in their homes, looking at their bills. Maybe they've been furloughed. We just saw today it was announced that the US is at over 14% unemployment, which is, well past depression levels, or at par with depression levels. And maybe they're looking at their Visas, MasterCards, and Amex bills and realizing the only thing I'm seeing on there is the grocery store or a couple things from Amazon. And maybe I don't need to spend that much money going forward, or maybe I don't want to, or maybe I only will for a special occasion. So there's a lot of concepts that we have to sort of figure out of what's going to happen. Are we going to come out of this and all governments are going to absolve the money that they gave us? Are we going to come out of this and some governments will, or some governments going to have this bill that we're going to have to pay? No one's really sure. And even the smartest people in economics, which is not me, uh, don't have a clear answer for how this really does play out. So it's an interesting time to talk about consumer behavior, because my gut would have said we're going to look at our bills and spend a lot less, or be very apprehensive to spend. And then what we're seeing actually is when the worlds do open up, people are out and shopping in a frenzied state because they missed it so much. So I don't have the answer. I just have two concepts that I have to hold in my mind at the same time.
Business leaders didn't listen in 2008 and 2009, did they?
To
In the
what?
financial crisis. Well, it sounds as if they wanted to get back to doing what they were doing that got them into trouble in the first place once the crisis had passed. Let's just go back to business as normal. At least that's my impression, right or wrong.
Yeah, I don't think we can compare these two situations by a long shot. And I think that governments come in and regulate, and then governments change and deregulate, and rules change and consumer behaviors change. So I don't know that I could draw even a dotted line between the recession that you're talking about and this moment in time. I mean, our economies were booming. People were excited. We were in a bull market for a long time. People thought it would end. I don't think we thought it would end this suddenly and this quickly. Uh, but I would still argue that this isn't like a war depression where buildings and countries have been blown out and decimated and millions of people have died. We shut the lights off because there was a pandemic. And we are in a situation now where I think we've shut the lights off for so long that we've forgotten why we've done it. So people are sort of worried about getting sick now, and we should always be worried about getting sick, but that's not why we're doing this on a Zoom call. We're doing this on a Zoom call and we're staying shut in because the idea was to elongate how many people get sick over a longer period of time so that we don't impact the healthcare system. And it seems like we've forgotten that. And now it's all about like, how do we not get sick? How do we protect everybody? We're going to get sick. It's a virus, it's a flu, it's a disease. This is the way of the world. We get hit by cars. And I'm not diminishing it or comparing it to other things. It's terrible, but we didn't stay in to not get sick. We stayed in to protract the amount of time people get sick to hope that the number stays down, that we don't impact our healthcare systems. And now in doing that, we have to deal with, again, two concepts at the same time. Do we open up and potentially kill or get a lot more people sick? Or do we stay in lockdown and protect those who we're protecting, and at the same time do massive damage to not only the economy, but I think our lives? I mean, I know that I don't know what you have in terms of children in your life, but I have 3 young children here in my house, and I can tell you that this is a very unhealthy environment, and we're in the best case scenario here. This is not the place any of us should want to be. And we
No,
have
I
to
worry
start,
a great deal about my 2 grandchildren.
yeah,
One's going, one's 5 and one's 18 months. And the 18-month-old knows practically nothing else. It's very
correct.
strange.
And even the 5-year-old might have recollections of this, but as you move from that sort of kindergarten age up to grade 6 and into middle school and high school, this is not the situation we want to find ourselves in. It's a paradox of two concepts being held at the same time. One being don't be on screens all day. It's very unhealthy. It's not social. It's not good. You need interactions. You need to be able to congregate and do things. And on the other hand, we're telling them stay inside and stay on your laptop all day and do homeschooling. So it is, and with that homeschooling, someone who's worked both remotely and had many, many offices all over the world and platforms that I have, I can tell you that success doesn't come from the work you do alone. Success comes from working in teams and groups and what they're working on and what you're hearing and their interactions. And school is no different. Kids can thrive on their own. Show them something, they learn it. But I think they learn best when they're watching others, raising hands, having those dialogues that aren't even directly related to the question at the front of the class. So there is not only damage to the education system, but also just the psychology of them, their socialization. We happen to be very fortunate to live at the end of a park. So we literally go down the driveway into the park, and watching very young kids, tell people to social distance, or their apprehension to approach friends that they physically haven't seen in a long time, it's jarring to see as an adult. So I'm as concerned about us protecting those we need to protect from COVID-19 as I am for rather protecting just the general health of our society. Look at things like alcohol sales gone up over 50+%. Look at things like domestic abuse. We tend to forget that there are millions of people who are abused, and their only sort of escape is to leave the home, to go to work, to do other things, and they are essentially trapped. Parents who are on the verge, child abuse problems, the list goes on. And so I'm very concerned for our society because we shut it down very, very quickly, rightfully so. But now we have to figure out not just how to reopen the businesses and the economy, but our lives.
In the news, Shopify, market cap, topping RBC. Harley Finkelstein, I believe, is a good friend of yours. Is he not?
He is. Yeah,
That's
I've known
quite
Harley
the
for a long
success
time.
story. That's quite the story.
Yeah, Harley, I've known Harley since he was selling T-shirts in university, and we've been friends and connected for a long time. And I recently had him on my podcast to just sort of chat because, again, he's secluded where he's secluded. And as we were talking, I realized that it's very special to even have a friend who from basically being a university student to become one of the leaders of one of the largest companies in the world and the largest company in Canada. And I was telling him, quite emotionally, I think, that it's up there with highlights in your life like getting married and having kids, because it's an astounding thing to watch from literally nothing into something so spectacular. And I think that it's also a great indication and line of hope that we should all look at. This fact that there's this company that allows people to become merchants and to sell and order online for no or very little fee. And their ability to, they'll call it powering the rebels, but the real story is against an Amazon world, the empire. But the real story is that they really are helping many people in this moment pivot, turn their side hustles into full-time jobs, think about what they might want to do in a world that might have people staying at a further distance from one another or being home more, inside more often. And so with over 1 million merchants, people setting up e-commerce shops on the platform, so they just offer this sort of technology for people to sell stuff online. It's just an amazing story where they're in a current moment where their stock has gone up over 190% over the past year. It's gone up over 65% just in the month of April during this crazy virus.
Astounding. Yeah.
And yeah, they have a market cap. I mean, look, I'm the first to say that the stock is drunk and it needs to go home. I mean, the stock is out of control, and I would not be, if I was an investment advisor, I'd probably not be making a recommendation to buy right now. But I do still think it has legs. I think it's early days because the reality of the space is that e-commerce accounts for about 15% of all commerce.
15%.
So if
Okay.
yeah, so if they double to 30, I mean, in the month of April, we did have a doubling to 30 for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
Can it sustain? Will that become habitual? That becomes another massive game changer for them. So yeah, it's an important company for all of us, really. Not because it's like Amazon where you buy from Amazon, but you're not buying from Shopify. You're buying from the merchants who are selling using the Shopify technology.
Right.
It's basically a marketplace.
Right.
And so if you don't know anything about it or haven't been exposed to it. One is, well, now it's the biggest company in Canada, so maybe you should. And two is, if you're thinking about how to do things, Shopify empowers you to do those things now.
The
David.
idea seems so self-evident, but he came up with the idea, though.
Well,
Well,
I don't know if
people,
it's, I don't know if this is not an idea that is new to Shopify. Selling online was a very established business prior to Shopify coming into business. Shopify had a couple of sort of wins in their sales. One of them is that they were very cloud-based, which is most people had an e-commerce infrastructure from the big players had different versionings, and you have to keep installing them and optimizing them. Being cloud-based allows Shopify to update it, and everybody's on the same system at the same time, so it creates more flexibility. They had a very powerful hosting system. So again, when there were surges in times like Black Friday and stuff like that, they could handle the surge in hosting, bulletproof hosting on the platform. They also benefited from the social aspects of things. The fact that people talk about it and share in places like Instagram, which is Kylie Cosmetics. Kylie Kardashian booms her company to $1 billion, first $1 billion in sales in a couple years, making her a billionaire, all driven by Shopify. But she was driving it through Instagram and social and that sort of stuff. And there's many other sort of mitigating factors that just sort of had the wins in their sales. The fact that they democratized the software and basically made it accessible for free. And then there's Shopify Plus for more premium customers who are doing more and need more. So that's another thing too, where suddenly my barrier to entry to sell coffee mugs or laptops is now zero, whereas before it was hundreds of thousands of dollars in technological infrastructure. So they did a lot of things very, very brilliantly at a really good timing, and had at the same time a lot of merchants looking for ways to sell in different ways. And the smart things they've done are countless and endless through acquisitions and new products. They recently launched an app called Shop, and it's for all of their merchants to be able to be aggregated in one shopping app. So if you think about adding in brands like Allbirds and Kylie Cosmetics and whatever other brands you love that are powered by Shopify, it's an amazing marketplace that gives them the ability to help promote the merchants and sell more for their merchants. So it's a very interesting model, and they're very smart. I think we should be very proud they come out of Canada. I mean, Harley is from Montreal, was born here, but spent a lot of time in Ottawa, which is where they're based. Shopify does a lot of things to maintain their Canadian patriotism. They are very philanthropic and very kind, and I just think it's a great company. It's always been a great company, and it's the greatest company.
One last thing, we got to let you go. Andy Nelman was with us a few days ago, and I read a quote: "Andy Nelman, only guy to ever fire me."
Yeah, he loves that. And he loves that. He fired me. So we were talking earlier about mobile content. Andy Nelman and Garner Bornstein hired me at Airborne Entertainment or Airborne Mobile to help them launch what they would call big brands on small screens. And I was their marketing person for about a year-ish, and then I got let go. And probably the greatest thing. I say it lovingly because it was the greatest thing that ever happened to me. It is moments like that that make you just decide at the fork in the road which direction you're going to choose. And up until that point, I think part of the situation for me was Andy is Andy, and he's still one of my closest friends. And I sort of sat there often on my days thinking, what I'm doing for him, I should be doing for myself. And there are moments when you can reflect. I mean, it was quite shocking to sort of be let go at that point. It was an exciting company. I was loving the work. But again, life happens, and it was a very self-reflective, powerful moment for me. And in hindsight, whenever I'm mentoring or advising people who ask, I always say that when you look back, it's always the falling downs and getting your knees scraped that mean more than the awards, trophies, and accolades.
Well, that's what Andy said. We had him on a few weeks ago, and I know you guys talked together a couple of days ago, actually.
Yeah.
But he said the falling down. I asked him if he ever hit walls, and he said, yeah. And then you pick yourself up, you dust yourself off, and you go ahead. But not all of us think that way. A lot of us still lie down.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't want to come off as a sort of Tony Robbins motivational speaker. I definitely have my days and my moments, and what takes somebody a couple months might take me a couple years. But I don't look at it as getting back up and rah, rah, rah so much as lessons. And sometimes the better lessons we learn are the tougher lessons.
Why did he fire you?
Yeah, I sucked at the work. I mean, look, Andy says it best. We were trying to market the unmarketable at the time. They had a round of financing that came in that was good, but lower than they thought, and it required them to sort of zig and zag. And if I'm to be self-reflective, I think a lot of the work I was doing was not required. I mean, there was a lot of make work and sort of doing things that the industry or the company at the time didn't really require. And they also had some really smart people doing really smart things. So it was a fun job and I really enjoyed it and I love working with them. But I just also, if I can be self-reflective, I understood it. I don't know that if I were in their position, I would have made a different move.
Mitch Joel, thank you very much.
No, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Cheers.
Have a good weekend.
Do you still get a chance to play the bass if you have any free time?
I don't play anymore. What I do is I have a podcast where I'm trying to slowly build the largest oral history of electric bass players called Groove the No Trouble Podcast, which is at notrouble.com. And that's just sort of my passion project for going to concerts and interviewing bass players and hanging out.
Enjoy.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Bye
Thanks,
now.
Mitch.
Ciao.
You got to stop leaning back there, buddy, because we can't hear you when you're doing this.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You got to stop doing that. So
Sorry
anyway,
about that.
what a brain spinning in
Yeah.
that.
Well, I'm congratulating the two of us because we seem to understand what he was saying.
We looked like we knew what the hell we
Yeah.
were talking about, didn't we?
Yeah, no, you're right. I can, you know what? I can hear it in my own headsets.
Yeah,
I sound as if I'm.
But it's
talking from
it's a reflex because when he gets going, the stuff just kind of pours out. He's quite something.
And it all makes such self-evident, like it seems self-evident
It
now.
seems to be so obvious. Yeah.
Yeah.
But,
That's what I was trying to get at with the ideas.
Takes someone to kind
But,
of congeal it together. So anyway,
Good. Well, I hope I didn't talk over you too much.
No,
because
I'm
I knew
sorry.
Once he got going, thank goodness you got it started. But I didn't know where to start, to tell you the truth.
There's so much there. Anyway, we'll link to his podcast, his own personal site. He's got his podcast. He talks about music. He does a bit with Terry DeMonte on Shome every so often. He's all over the place.
Oh my God, does Terry understand?
Yeah, but you got to listen. I think there's an excerpt there of Terry talking about a smart speaker, and he says, "Can this thing hear me when I go to the toilet or something like that?" So yeah, if you think the questions we're asking are basic, you got to hear DeMonte.
Terry's a lovable guy, though. At least
Yeah.
he's an honest guy.
Okay.
You know, we should ask Mitch if we could get Harley on.
Oh, that would be interesting.
I mean, he may, why would, it's very nice of Mitch to come on, but
Yeah.
Harley's God. And he's
That would-
10 years younger, I believe.
I believe so. Anyway, these sharp young guys here making the move and making the world go round. It's quite something.
Yeah.
Have a good weekend. Monday, we will be joined by Diana Bishop, who is
my God, I
colleague
hadn't
of
talked to
mine
her and
from way back. She was a television reporter. She went off and became an author. She writes a blog about Paris. We'll find out where that all came from. And she's quite
good for her.
Quite
because she was their Ottawa correspondent at CTV for
She
a
was
while.
at CTV the last time I saw her. She worked at CBC when I first met her. So
that's where I first met her. Yeah,
and we've got so many others coming up too. So thank you very much for the feedback. And
and Brian Murphy said all you have to do is listen to. He said you guys sound smart.
Oh, really?
Brian,
Brian,
I think he's full of.
I think he's having it.
Oh, he's belting.
I think he's.
Actually, that gives me an idea.
Yeah.
We should probably try because Betsy knows her personally too. We should try and get in touch with Louise Penny. Speaking of a successful author.
Louise, the authoress. Yes, of course,
a very successful author.
Okay.
I'll see where I can go with that.
We're all over the place here. There's much more to come.
Frightening.
Yes.
Including snow.
Yes.